Hi everyone, Arundhati here, and welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I hope you are doing well. As you know, November 7th, my annual Teaching Yoga to Beginners course is launching. This is a course built specifically for yoga teachers. I have taken a decade of my learning, my mistakes, the things I have tried, the things I have learned, and packed it into a 30-hour course for you, so you don't end up taking 10 years and making all the mistakes that I did. Now, while I call it a Teaching Yoga to Beginners course, I believe teaching a beginner student is extremely important because they can potentially be lifelong students of yours. And a lot of yoga teachers ask me, how do I create community? How do I scale? You scale by taking every single student who walks in and doing your best to keep them as lifelong practitioners of yoga, right? So I shared the blueprint of what has worked with me. At Aham Yoga, like you know, I have been an immigrant who came into this country 10 years ago, 11 years ago at this point, and who knew nobody and didn't have any business background. And I literally figured it out one student at a time. Okay, so today the students you see at Aham Yoga, about 70% of them have been in our beginner classes. Some of them are even teachers at the studio today. So I'm sharing this blueprint in this course that starts on November 7th. So whether you are an experienced yoga teacher or a brand new one, I believe there's a lot in there, a lot that does not get covered in yoga teacher trainings because most of them focus on teaching how to teach a student who already knows how to do some yoga. Okay. So I hope you will come on October 16th. I'm hosting a information session. And depending on when you're listening to this podcast drop, you may have already missed it. The replay is available. Just make sure you sign up for our newsletter. That's where the replay will go out. The link is in my bio on Instagram as well as on this podcast description. Okay. So remember, the Teaching Yoga to Beginners course happens once in a couple of years and it's happening November 7th. And I invite you to come explore, get into that Zoom room with me on October 16th, and let's chip away at understanding where you're stuck when it comes to teaching yoga to beginners and how this blueprint can help you. In today's episode, we're going to go into 3 things that I wish I knew when I was teaching beginners. And I'm going to tell you 3 things in this episode that took me 10 years to figure out. So let's get to it. So in under 10 minutes here, I'm going to tell you what took me a decade to figure out when it comes to teaching yoga to beginners. There are these 3 things that I have stuck to time and time again that have been game changers, and none of them are about poses. Okay. In fact, these are what I commonly refer to as invisible yoga when it comes to teaching yoga. And I've said invisible yoga on the podcast before, and applying the yoga to the lives of our students and ourselves as well. Okay. So the 3 things are: focus on how they will learn instead of how you will teach. Okay. Focus on how they will learn instead of how you will teach. This one right here is gold. I wish somebody told me this over a decade ago when I had started teaching, because it really isn't about the list of poses you have or the sequence you are building. Yes, you need that in a class, but there is so much more. Okay. Imagine if we all had just class plans and we told people how to bend and stretch, we'd all be super successful. But the reason is that that's just one fragment of your class. That's why a lot of yoga teachers suffer and struggle and wonder why they're not able to succeed. It's not about the list of poses. While that matters, it's about how you offer them. It's how you curate that list. It's how you make the yoga you're teaching relatable to the student in front of you. How adaptable can it be? You have to recognize the difference between challenging a student versus engaging a student, right? So let's take a number. Let's take 100%. As our full yoga class. And most yoga teachers will spend 80% of that effort on the class plan and the playlist and the sequence, right? I would actually say you need 10%. Once you have the blueprint I share in this course, you will need 10% of that time on the sequence, okay? And you can spend the remaining 90%, 80% of your time and energy and effort on communicating, on delivery and building rapport and making it relatable and making sure it's adaptable. Right? So for a beginner, your sequences don't have to be fancy. They just need to be straightforward and effective and relatable. Okay. You have to recognize that making them successful is extremely important. And it's not about what poses you teach alone. It's how you teach what you have. So lean more into how they will learn instead of what they will learn. And I will walk you through this in the course. I will help you understand what this means. And not every beginner is the same. So how do you tailor it to who you are defining as a beginner, and so much more. It took me a decade almost to get this right. So just make sure that the that you hear me when I say focus on how they will learn more than what you will teach. Okay. And we'll talk more about it in the course. The next one there, the second point, is teach the practice more, not just the pose. Okay. Teach the practice more, not just the pose. A yoga class isn't about just getting students in and out of a yoga pose, right? In fact, I think you know that how to bring a student into a pose, tell them what to do, take them out of the pose. But it's about understanding how to make those poses that you teach, or and I'm saying poses very generally, poses, breathing practices, the restoration, I'm putting all of that in this category, right? How to take that pose and relate that to the greater practice of yoga and find that link between the practice, the pose, and the person, and really building that link. Okay, that's what we'll focus on. So you can teach the same things in class, right? In beginners yoga, there's a lot of repetition, but you can give them new perspective, a little more of a tidbit about what they're doing, and essentially expand their horizon when it comes to, or their understanding when it comes to beginners yoga. Right? Most yoga teachers teacher trainings won't be able to break down teaching yoga to this level of nitty-gritty details, right? So it's really up to the drive and the skill and the ambition and the dedication of the yoga teachers to get themselves to this point. So what we can do is can make a list of things in which you'll be able to take a part of your class or a pose, for example, and make a list of things where it can be applied to everyday life. I will give you examples in the course itself. I will make you build on this and explore this in your teaching journey. But know that we have to bridge the gap between what is available just out there, like this is a pose, this is what we do, and how to make that relatable and applicable and actionable in the student's life. And how that the more you can connect the person and the practice with the pose, the more they will come back, the more they will succeed, the more they will want to know. Okay. So making yoga more relatable is one of the key things about this course and a lot of my work in general. So yoga needs to be less complex to the beginner, and you want your student to be able to just lap up what you're offering. And that's why I say teach the practice more often, not just the pose, connect the person, the practice, as well as the pose. And we'll do all of this in the course. So the last one I want to leave you with is stop queuing. Queuing will only get you that far. Start communicating. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Stop queuing, start communicating. Personally, I think yoga teachers spend way too much time on building queuing and instructions and not enough time on communicating, right? We often forget, even though we're the only one speaking, it is not a monologue. It's a silent dialogue, as I call it. Okay. And we need to improve our communication skills as yoga teachers to develop, and developing better queuing skills is one of them. But queuing is not the only thing. Okay. Our communication needs to be worked on. And it all comes down to this one thing I've been going on and on about, and that is making yoga more relatable. So how to make what you're saying understandable to your audience. I have a global audience at Aham Yoga, many of whom English language is not their first language. Actually, English language is not even my first language, right? So really communicating in a way that it's relatable, not just sitting and reading out a yoga sutra to a bunch of beginners and it has no value in their lives when their back is hurting. Or when they're in a pose and they're falling out of it, there's a disconnect. So I'm going to be talking a lot about what is communication in a beginner's yoga class. How do we do that? What do we mean by making yoga more relatable? It's not just about building the fanciest set of cues for a particular pose. That'll only get you so far. So what we need to do is address the needs of the student in front of us and to disarm ourselves in many ways as yoga teachers so we can really build the bridge between the teacher and the student. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with those three things. Okay. A quick recap is the first one is focus on how they will learn instead of what you will teach. The second is teach the practice more, not just the pose. Remember to connect the person, the practice, as well as the pose. And the third and final most important one is stop queuing, start communicating. Again, the information session is on October 16th at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. Make sure you get on the waitlist for that. The enrollments will open on the same day. November 7th is when the course launches. And all the details are in the link in your show notes, in the podcast description, as well as my Instagram handle. I cannot wait to meet you on Monday. And more importantly, work with you in understanding where you need support when it comes to teaching beginners yoga. I have no doubt that this course will add value to your teaching life in general. But I will see you soon. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.